Oh. So you should still be able to, like in the upper right, hit the 3 dots, I believe it is, and do like your screen share.
Okay. Let me give that a shot. Can you see that? Probably see yourself.
I see myself.
Cool. Nice.
Let me get this thing going. Let's see. Are you connected on the YouTube channel? Let's see if we can.
YouTube.
Oh, great. It might be choppy. It is live. We got 3 viewers.
Right. Cool.
Okay, well, first, welcome everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces. For those that are new, first I want to just thank you to Daniel over here, who's helped us with this room. And I certainly can't do this whole thing that I try to, seems pretty unorganized, but I certainly can't do it without the help of some people that aren't here today also, Joe and Matt. So today we got Adam Driscoll going to talk to us about his PowerShell Tools, which I think is going to be pretty cool. And while we're getting set up here, I don't know how ready you are to go, Adam.
I'm pretty ready to go, so
okay.
If you have any announcements or anything, go for it, though.
So, just already mentioned it, some of you straggled in, but we might have a little trouble with the YouTube stream, just because Google now doesn't have they deprecated their Hangouts Live, and so this is why we're trying to do this new thing here. So I don't know how well it's going to work. Hopefully it will. I'm going to record this locally as well, so that if it's terrible, hopefully I can upload the video later. So let me see if I can get Adam up on the screen here. So we'll have to, we might have to figure out something better. But last time we figured this out, right? What was it to go full screen again? Okay. All right, have at it, Adam.
All right, sounds good. All right, let's make this full screen, I guess. All right, so that's kind of weird. I'm just gonna walk through it this way. So today I'm going to be talking about PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio and PowerShell Pro Tools, which is also included in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. I'm Adam Driscoll. I'm a 7-time PowerShell MVP, or Cloud Data Center MVP. I've been working on PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio for about 8 years now. It was originally released as a tool called PowerGUI VSX. That actually had the old PowerGUI editor embedded in Visual Studio. And then eventually I just kind of developed the PowerShell language support for Visual Studio. So I run a little software company called Ironman Software. Right now, one-man shop, but so I get to kind of work on this stuff full time. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio, and some of, one sec, I'm going to kill Slack. Great. All right. And I'm talking about PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio, some of the features that are in that particular extension, and then I'll talk about PowerShell Pro Tools a little bit, and then we'll get into a demo of both of those tools. So what is PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio? It's language support for PowerShell in Visual Studio 2017 and 2019. It started in Visual Studio 2015, and it's been kind of being updated as they release new versions of Visual Studio. And currently, we support 2017 and 2019. It provides like basic editor support, so kind of the things you would expect inside any kind of language PowerShell editor. Very similar to VS Code and the ISE. It has syntax highlighting, error tagging, brace matching, IntelliSense, that kind of thing. It also brings along project support, which is something that the ISE nor VS Code have, which is a way of integrating into Microsoft's build technology called MS Build. So there's actually PowerShell script projects that kind of allow for script organization, project options, and then some way of working into the MS Build system. So I'll kind of show off some of that. Also, there is debugging support, so you can do local debugging and remote debugging of PowerShell scripts. So you can step through your script, set breakpoints, that kind of thing, as well as view variables, and then attach to other PowerShell processes. So very similar debugging experience to both the ISE and VS Code. There's also a bunch of different tool window support. So when we get to Visual Studio, you'll see if you haven't played with it before, there's like a lot of different tool windows that you can use to view different things about your code. So it's integrated into some windows like the task list, the error window, the test window where it'll actually pop up pester tests, as well as an interactive console that you can type in commands on the fly, just like you would in the ISE or VS Code. On top of that extension, I built a set of like pro tools, I call them. So PowerShell Tools Visual Studio itself is free. PowerShell Pro Tools is a set of like paid extensions that I've developed on top of PowerShell Tools Visual Studio. So some of these features that you get when you pay for it are user interface design. So there's both a WinForm PowerShell designer in Visual Studio, as well as Visual Studio Code. And then also some XAML integration. XAML integration isn't super tight, but because Visual Studio, XAML is kind of separate from PowerShell in certain ways because you define everything in XML. But there is some XAML integration there. Another big feature is script packaging, so you can turn all your scripts into executables. So it'll take a whole bunch of scripts, bundle them up into an executable, which then you can hand off and nobody can modify, that kind of thing. And you can also build installers, MSI installers, from executables or any kind of file that you want to lay down. Additionally, there are some performance profiling tools and some code conversion tools between C# and PowerShell, and I'll show you a couple examples of that kind of stuff. So that's my rambly PowerPoint. So I am going to actually hop into my VM here and show off the extension, kind of how to get the extension, how to set up your project, and some of the features. So to install PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio, you need to click this extensions view up at the top here. So you'll see that there's just this extension drop or tool window. Click that, click Manage Extensions, and then from here you can actually click the Online tab on the left-hand side here and search for PowerShell, and it will pop up the PowerShell Tools for Visual Studio. So you can download those right through Visual Studio. The extension supports PowerShell or Visual Studio Professional, Enterprise, and Community Edition. So Community Edition is the actual free version of Visual Studio. So if you're a small shop or if you're using this for like your own personal projects, you can actually get that for free. And then the PowerShell tools work for that as well. So once you have the extension installed, what you're going to need to do is actually create a project. I already actually have a project open right here, but if you were to create your own project, what you would do is you click File up in the top left here. Zoom, it's kind of weird. And then you click New Project, and it's going to open up a new project wizard. And up in the search box here in the top, you can actually type PowerShell or hit this drop down and then select PowerShell from the language options, and you're going to have a couple different options to create new projects for your PowerShell scripts. So kind of what a project allows you to do is organize your scripts. So rather than just having loose files laying around, you actually add your scripts to this project. And on the right-hand side here, you'll see that I have a Solution Explorer window that has my project open in it. It has a bunch of different PS1 files of different types. and they're just, they have icons based on what type of file they are, that kind of thing. Additionally, projects provide you with the ability to add certain properties to your solution. So you can set debugging arguments, module manifest information, that kind of thing, like module info, your author components, requirements, that kind of stuff. As well as build events, so you can actually run scripts when you run builds. So unlike C# or VB.NET, when you run a build, it doesn't actually compile anything, but it does allow you to kind of integrate into that MS build environment and execute PowerShell scripts during your build. And then finally, there's some advanced options around packaging that I will talk about a little bit later. So that's kind of the project system, and as you start to work with Visual Studio, what you're going to actually do is add new items to this project system, and there's a bunch of different items that you can add to. These are kind of like they call them item templates. So you can add really any arbitrary file. These are just kind of the built-in item templates that are available inside PowerShell Tools. So we have things like PowerShell scripts, tester tests, data files, and then some other ones like modules, forms, and services. That some of these are pro things, but most of these are the free stuff. So what I have open right here is actually just a PS1 file, and this should look really familiar. It is actually the ISE itself was a port of the Visual Studio Editor. So if you've ever used the ISE, this might look like very, very familiar because it was actually the same editor that they ripped out of Visual Studio, and that's what they released the ISE as. So it was kind of interesting to learn that later on, that the ISE was actually just a port of Visual Studio, and that's why this editor experience is very similar to the ISE. But what you'll see here is that you have a lot of the same functionality that you get with something like VS Code or the ISE in terms of syntax highlighting. So it highlights the different tokens, based on if it's a function or if it's a comment and if it's a string, that kind of thing. As well as brace matching, it'll do region matching, that kind of thing. And you also have things like IntelliSense. So you get all your IntelliSense just like you would in VS Code or ISE. Some other cool things are this thing on the right-hand side is kind of neat. It's kind of like an enhanced scroll bar. I don't know if they have that in VS Code. Yeah, they do. They added it to VS Code. But yeah, so that's kind of neat. And then you have a function drop-down that allows you to kind of jump between the different functions, which is also something that is part of VS Code. So that's kind of some of the basic editor experience stuff. Some other things that are integrated into here are PS Script Analyzer. So if we do things like use, you know what, I don't have PS Script Analyzer installed on this VM. But it will integrate into PS Script Analyzer and give recommendations, kind of like you get in VS Code. If you were to type GPS or something like that, and you highlight over it, if you have Script Analyzer installed on your path, see, VS Code installs its own version of Script Analyzer, while PowerShell Tools does not. But if you did have that installed into your user profile, it would find that and then offer the same suggestions that you would get in VS Code and quick fixes and that kind of thing. Yeah, so let me just hop open my notes, make sure I'm going over all the stuff I wanted to. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about some of the tool windows that you can integrate into your editing experience that you don't usually find in VS Code or ISE. And some of those are things like the task list. So the task list actually will look for certain items or tokens inside your PowerShell scripts and then add them to the list so they can easily find them later. So we've all done the thing where we go like, to do, this is something I need to do. So what it'll actually do is it will find pretty much any to-do within your scripts and then put them in this list so you can easily find that collection of to-dos later. You can also do custom tokens. So if you set up, something like hack and then put that in there, set up a custom token for hack. And now it finds that as well. So it'll allow you to kind of see what lines those are on, and if you have a big script file, you can kind of easily see what tasks you have that you need to do. I can kind of zoom in on that, so you can see that that's what the task list window does. So Visual Studio is all about the tool window. So that's one. Another interesting one is the error list view. So if you have syntax errors inside your script, like if I type the script and never close this string, what you'll see is it'll obviously do the squiggly brace like you would see in VS Code or ISE, but it also has an error list view that will show you that error, and it'll give you like the line number and all that kind of thing, which is actually wrong for some reason. I'll have to look at that. Oops. So that is the error list window. One other cool integration that this has is it actually has pester test support. So as you can see here, I have a pester test that I've defined called, script project exists, and I'm validating whether or not it just runs is true. I better hope so. And you can actually open this test explorer window. And what it'll do is it'll actually find tests inside your project and then list them out individually like this. And you can right-click on them and say Run Selected Tests, and it'll actually invoke the pester test for you. So it's like a quick way to see which tests are failing, which are working, that kind of thing. So this one succeeded. If I were to change this to false and then run that test again, you'll see now my test will fail and it's red. So that's kind of a cool integration, test adapter support for pester. Some other cool things that you can do because you are in Visual Studio is that you can access what's called the DTE, which I don't even remember that it stands for anymore, but it's the automation environment for Visual Studio itself. So similar to the way that you used to be able to automate what the ISE did, you can actually automate what Visual Studio does. So I just set up a little script that is going to modify the status bar text, and you can actually run a script that inside Visual Studio that modifies Visual Studio itself. So if I actually go ahead and run this script, we'll hit this breakpoint, and if we look down at the status bar down here, you'll see that I have Hello Austin right there. So that is kind of neat because you can actually access your files. You can actually get into the code. You can edit text. You can add new files. You can manipulate source control, all that kind of stuff, just from writing scripts inside Visual Studio. So one thing I did want to kind of jump into now is the actual debugging experience. So there's local debugging as well as remote debugging. So when I say remote debugging, I don't actually mean a separate machine. What I mean is if you were to open another PowerShell window, for example, if I just did this, what I could actually do is connect my Visual Studio debugger up to this remote PowerShell process and debug scripts that way. But what I'm going to show you right now is actually how to do local debugging, which means debugging scripts that are just right here inside Visual Studio. So I just have this this script right here that lists both PowerShell processes or PWSH processes. I don't actually have PWSH installed in here, so I'm going to change this. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to set a breakpoint inside our script. So similar to the ISE or VS Code, you can click on the left-hand side here and it'll set a breakpoint. And then you can also press F9. F9 sets a breakpoint. And then to start debugging, what you can do is you can click F5 or the start button up here, and it will start the debugger up. And now my script is running, and it highlighted this line because now the debugger is waiting at that breakpoint. So when you enter debug mode in Visual Studio, what it actually does is it changes all the windows on you. So the way Visual Studio works in terms of window management is it has an editor experience or layout, and then it has a debugging layout. So right now we are currently in the debugging layout, and you can see I have a couple new windows that have popped up. First of all, I have the locals window. So what it means by locals, it means local variables that are currently defined at the scope that I'm currently at. So in the debugger right now, I'm sitting inside this get PowerShell process function, and you can see I have a whole bunch of variables defined. A lot of these are just like standard variables that are typically defined by default. So things like home or host, that kind of stuff is just there. And some of the other variables I've set from messing around inside my PowerShell environment, that kind of thing. And what you can actually do with the locals window is expand these variables. So if I wanted to look at the host, I could expand the different properties of the host, and then it kind of boils down those objects. You can see not only the value, but also the type of object. So then you can write your script kind of around using those variables, that kind of thing. The other thing that you can do is if you want to watch the value of a particular variable as it changes, you can add it to the watch list. This is kind of a good way to just pay attention to only a few variables that you care about. And if you click Add Watch, what it's actually going to do is it's going to pop open this watch window. And now the watch window will only have the variables that you've watched. So instead of having to look at that huge list of locals, you can now just kind of watch the variables that you're interested in. And it has the same options as the locals window in terms of viewing the value, the type, and expanding the properties. On the right-hand side here, we actually have what is called the call stack window. So the call stack window is also available in VS Code if you're using that extension. And it pretty much tells you where you are and how you got here. So you can see I started this script, and then I called this function on line 12 of this script, and now I'm sitting on line 5 inside that function. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see that it's saying I'm at get, PowerShell process, and it was called on line 12. And what we can do is we can actually double-click those different steps, and it'll take you to where those, executions were happening. So you can kind of see how your script behaved and how you got to where you were just by double-clicking these different locations inside the call stack window. So as the script runs, pretty much all the output is going to go to 2 places. The first place is the output window. So I output a couple processes. I don't know why I just output the E's, but I output a couple processes. The other place that it outputs is to the PowerShell Interactive window. So the PowerShell Interactive window, since I didn't have it open, that's why there's no output. I think if I run this again, it'll do that for me. Oh, that's why it's doing IDs. I didn't even notice it did that. So now you can see that inside the PowerShell Interactive window, I'll put the IDs there as well. So the Interactive window, unlike the output window, is actually, as the name states, interactive. So you can do things like get process ID 7716, and then run that just like you would in the ISC or VS Code or on the command line. And it has the same IntelliSense experience as the editor, as well as syntax highlighting, that kind of thing. You can also hook it up to other machines using some of these buttons and clear the output, that kind of thing. One other neat feature that it integrated in here is the PowerShell Command Explorer. So this is something that was in the ISC, but I'm not sure. Did they put that in VS Code? Yeah, that's what this is. So it's pretty much the implementation of that inside Visual Studio. So the idea is that you can see that these are all grouped by module name here. So I have things like app background task, AppX, BitLocker, that kind of thing. And then you can expand it and actually see the commands that are part of that module. If you double click it, it takes you to this view. It allows you to enter different options, and then once you have it, you can actually drag it and insert it into your PowerShell script. So that is kind of a rundown of what PowerShell Tools gives you inside Visual Studio. So there's a whole bunch of kind of ancillary things that you get for just being in Visual Studio. One of those things is like Git integration. Like there is nothing that would need to be implemented in Posh Tools to provide Git integration. It's just part of Visual Studio. So if you're using Posh Tools in Visual Studio, you automatically have Git integration. The other big thing is that there are thousands and thousands of other extensions that you can augment your Visual Studio experience with. So similar to VS Code, where it's a very extensible platform, there's a whole bunch of other things that you can do to kind of increase customization of this platform. There are a lot of options available in terms of like fonts and colors. You can set those all up yourself, and okay. It's kind of formatted weird, but there's actual PowerShell settings in here, that kind of thing. And you can switch between dark and light modes if you want. All right, so that's kind of that. But now I kind of want to talk about some of the other features that you can do with some of the Pro tools. And let's see. We'll start with WinForms. So to add a new WinForm in Visual Studio, what you can do is you can click Add, New Item, and there's actually a form option here. So that will scaffold out, or it's a template for a Windows form in PowerShell. So what that will create is these two files. It'll create, well, three files. It'll create the form.ps1 file, the myform.designer.ps1 file, and a resource file. And if we look at this and we double click myform.ps1, what's going to open is the actually like design host for Windows Forms. And you can see here I have my WinForm. I can drag and drop controls. I can make them bigger and smaller. I can pop open the toolbox, and you'll see after it initializes that it has all the standard controls that you would expect from WinForms. So this is the actual same form designer that C# and VB.NET and all that use. It's just integrated in a way that it generates PowerShell instead of generating C# or VB.NET. So we can, take one of these common controls and drag and drop it onto the form, and now we have a checkbox. So behind the scenes, what it's actually doing is it's generating a bunch of designer code for you, so you don't have to write it yourself. And what you'll see here is here's the code for the button that I just created, as well as the checkbox I just created, and then it's adding those controls to the form, and that kind of thing. So if I want to, what I can actually do to make this an interactive form, if you were to double click on this button, it's going to take you to the actual event handler code for that button itself. So what this actually did is I did this previously, and what it'll do is it'll automatically generate this button click handler for you. And if you look at the designer, what it's actually doing is it's hooking that up to this add click event handler here, and pretty much setting that variable as the add click event handler. So it'll call that script block when the button is clicked. And then inside my button click, what I'm doing is I'm just going to show a message box that pops up and says, "Hello, Austin." So now if I run this script, you'll notice that it pops up this WinForm, and if I click this, it is going to open up this message box. And there's a checkbox I added just before and that kind of thing. So, yeah, so it's like a full, WinForm experience inside Visual Studio. You can access other controls using my form, and then you'll see things like button 1 and button 2 are here. So it gives you all the IntelliSense for that form while you're trying to work on it and that kind of thing. So there is, like I said, WPF support. It's kind of limited. What it does is it actually it allows you to do this. So most of the WPF, I guess, authoring in terms of the visuals, the visual design is actually done in XAML. And this is XAML code. It is XML mostly, and you just kind of define your UI with that XML, and it produces, scroll in on this, it produces, UIs similar to forms. WPF is a little more modern than WinForms, so you can do a lot more with WPF. It's not tied to the Windows kind of windowing system built into Windows. It actually uses like graphics rendering to render these forms. And on the back end, how that integrates with PowerShell is the PowerShell Tools kind of library or extension will generate this PowerShell code for you to load up that XAML and then show that dialog just like you would the WinForm one. So you don't have to remember how to write this code every time. So hopefully I didn't break this. I don't know what I was doing before. Oh, maybe I did. I didn't actually try that before. I know what it is. I was messing around with this. Yeah. You can also generate event handlers and stuff like that, just like the WinForm one does. Yeah, see, there's my WPF window now running via PowerShell. So there's not too much rocket science to that one. It's just kind of loading up the XAML and then showing the dialog using the just generated PowerShell code for that. So that's another way that you can build UIs in Visual Studio. So you kind of pick between XAML and WinForms. One kind of nifty thing to have, like this, I think is more of a toy, and I built it kind of for fun, and I put it in here, is the ability to actually convert code in between C# and PowerShell. So what I have right here is an actual C# class. So if this is kind of unfamiliar, you can see it's kind of mad because I pasted it into a PS1 file. This is actual C# code. This would compile as C#. And what you can do inside PowerShell Tools is like if you copy and paste or cut and paste a C# snippet or class or something like that. If you right click, you can actually select paste as PowerShell. So you more or less go to a website, like MSDN. They have a lot of C# examples, and if you wanted to see how to do that in PowerShell, you could actually use the paste as PowerShell option here. And then what it's going to actually do is it's going to convert it into a PowerShell class. So why I say this is kind of a toy is like it's not perfect, so you can't just go ahead and convert your entire code base via this method, but it gets pretty close. So this is an actual PowerShell v5 class that was converted from a C# class. So you can also go the other way around. What's kind of interesting is like certain things will I wonder if I can do this. Let's try this. Whoops, that's not going to work. We're doing stuff on the fly. Hopefully it doesn't break the Visual Studio. Uh-oh. Maybe that was a bad idea. Oh, no.